welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops.
And Omari Sacco for the second, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. If you are not listening to Wes and Blake Silverman over on the Pin Down on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, you absolutely should be. Make sure you're reading all of Detroit Bad Boys' work on their website, listening to all of the other great Pistons podcasts out there. But of course, we highly recommend the Detroit Free Press subscribing to all of O2's work over there covering the Pistons through this playoff run, as well as the Motor City Hoops Substack, where you can subscribe for absolutely free. I'll have instant game notes and analysis. That's actually a lie, guys. I will not have an instant game note and analysis after Saturday's game because it is high school graduation and I'm going to have to watch that one after the fact. So that is not true and I apologize. But every other game, I will try to have instant notes and analysis and then video breakdowns whenever I get a chance as well. Appreciate all of you being here. I wasn't sure, O2, what we were going to get middle of the day on a Friday. We didn't even hit lunch break, but I got half a day from school today, so decided let's go ahead and record here early in the afternoon.
Yeah, and clearly a lot of people are already tapping in with us on their lunch breaks,
yes.
Or maybe they took a half day too, or maybe they're just at their desk watching, but whatever it may be, we certainly appreciate you. I would say your priorities are in order because we've got some, big stuff to talk about, obviously, with the Pistons being up 2-0 over the Cleveland Cavaliers, back-to-back 10-point wins. I asked Cade last night, how close is this to an ideal start, especially after starting last series so cold. And, the team seems to agree. It hasn't been perfect. They still have areas they can improve, but they've really executed much of their game plan through these two games so far.
Yeah, I think let's start here and then we can go from there. And again, thank you all of you. Wes is putting all those comments on there. We're not going to be able to read through all of them, but thank you guys for being here in the chat. If you're new, it does look like we have some new names, which is always cool this time of the year with the playoffs and obviously probably just the time of day. Put your comments, your questions in the chat. Wes is with us. He will star them. We'll try to talk about them or we'll bring them up as we bring up different topics. I think where I want to start, O2, because ultimately what I think has been the deciding factor in these two games is the way Detroit has played in clutch time. And they've gotten off to good starts. I think that's important as well. There's no question. But in both games, I think game one, Cleveland tied it, but did not take a lead. And then in game two, Cleveland did take a lead and Detroit immediately pushed right back in game two whenever Cleveland had taken the 2-point lead. But then also both games were very much in doubt with 5 minutes to go. And in both games, Detroit was just quite frankly the better team in clutch time.
Yeah, that's really what it boils down to. Pistons built big leads early in both, and Cleveland just has too much shooting and I think a little bit too much offensive juice to, stay down for a full 48 minutes. But in both cases, they got, back, just to the point to where it was a competitive game again. And then the Pistons said, okay, enough of that. And, they closed out strong. Last night, I think it was a 10-2 run after they took the lead. Tobias hit a couple of big shots, and then obviously Cade really stepped up, scored half of his points in the fourth quarter to help them close that out. I think we saw that last year against the Knicks, right? So many playoff series just comes down to those last 5 minutes. Who can generate the cleanest buckets, who has the it factor, and the defensive aspect obviously matters too. And I think we see the lessons from last year, and then obviously that first round against the Orlando Magic paying off, where they just have a calmness in those moments and they have an understanding of what they have to do to win.
I do want to shout this out. This has become one of the coolest things is the international aspect of the Pistons Pulse, as we have people from Ukraine, from Poland, or whoever's with us here from Poland, make sure and let us know that it is 7:20 p.m. there, because that is always a major topic of conversation. Someone said, Richard said it was close on paper, but Detroit looked in control the whole way, both games. I do not disagree with that at all, Richard. It did see, and from Twitter, largely due to AT's foul trouble yesterday, I would also... our commenters are getting better, and this is not going to be good because I will laugh out loud in the middle of a sentence. Colin Wood, very well played, my friend, says, "What up from Michigan? Time is 1:25. Well done, my friend. Well done. But yes, Ausar Thompson's foul trouble was a major factor yesterday, O2, and because he started off really, really good in that game. All right, where do you want to go? Let's not do this again. Let's talk about Cade Cunningham. Can we talk about Cade Cunningham?
Yeah, let's just start off with Cade.
I do this every episode, and it's this is ridiculous. I know he's the leading scorer in the playoffs right now. Let me just read you this tweet real fast, O2, and then you can go from there. I looked up his playoff to regular season numbers. And I just want you to hear that. Minutes went from 33.9 to 40.8. Points per game, 23.9 to 30.6. Field goal percentage went down a little bit, while field goal attempts have gone up 2.5. 3-point percentage, 34 to 41. Free throw percentage, 81 to 85. True shooting percentage, 56 to 60. 3-point attempt rate is up. Free throw rate is up. Usage percentage is up. And he's defending. What else can you ask from this guy?
Yeah, I made this comparison a long time ago and kind of backed away from it, but I'm going to go back to it now. He's like point guard Jimmy Butler. He's really good in the regular season. Obviously, Ausar in the regular season, all the NBA, but he's hit an even higher level in the playoffs where he's been the best player on the floor in pretty much every single game through the whole postseason. And, that's 9 games at this point. He's one of the leading scorers, if not the leading scorer. The assist numbers have been insane. Like, he's really defending. Like, there's just so many individual Pistons possessions where they're all just moving on a string, and, Cade's doing his part to add to it. He got the better of James Harden a few times, locking him down. So Cade's just showing everything that we've seen from him really since the beginning, but, he's honed it in and gotten better, and he's just doing it at such a high level now. Last night, that step back 3, dagger with about 2 minutes left, like, it's just stuff like that just shows he understands who he is and what he has to do, and he's done it every single night.
That one was tough, Omari. That one was tough. And he did it in essentially isolation. Like, they didn't get the action they wanted. They didn't get a switch, like anything like that. I thought Cade's game yesterday was kind of what I've always envisioned Cade as a player. Right? It's not necessarily the 45-point games that he had in game 5 against the Magic in terms of what I envision in a night in, night out basis. What I envision from Cade is getting his teammates involved, making shots when necessary, and then taking over in clutch time. And I think what that allows him to do is it allows him to be really good defensively. I thought he really helped set the tone defensively in this game. I thought he had a really good start to this game on the defensive end. And he's been awesome. He's been so good. And I cannot emphasize enough the minutes per game. This is a team that went to 7 in round 1, so they didn't have a whole lot of break. And now they've played 2 games and they're playing day off. And he's averaging 41 minutes a game almost, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So really, really impressive performance from Cade Cunningham thus far in the playoffs. I want to go to Tobias Harris next because he just continues to do what we saw in round 1. His points per game has gone up yet again in these playoffs. He's actually over 30% from 3, which isn't great, but that is trending the right direction. And O2, I think I've asked you this, but you know who leads this team in defensive rebounds? Not in rebounds per game, but in defensive rebounds? Tobias Harris. 21 points per game. He averages almost 7 defensive rebounds only per game. And as you mentioned, he had a huge isolation bucket in clutch time yesterday. I thought that was a really savvy design by JB. They went sideline out of bounds. They actually purposely got Harden switched off of Tobias Harris. Because if there's one thing Harden does do at the point of attack, it's he can be physical with the post up. They got Strus onto Harris, where I think physically is a better matchup if you're going straight post isolation, and Harris paid it off.
Yeah, this has been perhaps the best stretch of basketball of Tobias Harris's career. Not just individual play wise, but the stakes as well. They don't get out of round 1 without him. They don't go up 2-0 against Cleveland without his clutch scoring in both games in the fourth quarter, and to lead them off as well. Like you said, he's averaging 21 a game. He's been their second leading scorer. And he scored 20 in 7 straight games now. So just the consistency, but also the understanding for him of where he needs to attack, how he can attack. And just if he doesn't do it, who else will, right? That was the big question about the Pistons coming into the playoffs is how will they survive without that secondary scorer? And it turns out Tobias is a secondary scorer. And I think that's really taken care of a lot of the potential issues they would have had, especially in the half court. Just his ability to attack in the mid-range has been huge.
Let's go to Duncan Robinson. So Kylie says, checking in from Grand Rapids, was at LCA last night. Place was electric. Duncan is becoming a pretty underrated defender. I couldn't agree more. I put it in my notes. O2, how many times has the phrase Duncan's getting played off the court on defense been uttered in this 9-game playoff run? run?
Not much.
Yeah, I don't think a
And
single
he's
time,
gotten
right?
better as the playoffs have gone too. I think his last 3 or 4 games have been his best defensive stretch of the postseason.
Yeah, he's holding up. He is either doing a really nice job hard hedging and then not getting switched onto guys like Harden and Mitchell, or when he does, he's doing a nice job at least forcing them into tough contested shots. Now, it's not like it's perfect whatsoever. Like, I understand that, but he's making plays. And so his numbers in the playoffs right now, 12 points, 2-point percentage isn't great. We know that. He's 42% on almost 8 threes a game. That is massive for Detroit. We knew that this was going to be a huge thing, that Duncan Robinson couldn't go in a slump in the playoffs. 2.5 assists, over a steal per game right now in the playoffs. He averaged only 0.5 steals per game during the regular season. Just a really, really impressive performance thus far from Duncan Robinson in the playoffs. And we talked about how important he was going to be. And so far he's done that, because if you look at 3-point shooting for this team, still to this day, 9 games in, Duncan's at 42%. Cade's at 41%. Those guys are the high volume. The next best 3-point shooter now is Karis LeVert at 33%. And he's taken like 9 or something like that. Massive, massive performances from Duncan Robinson.
Yeah, and one thing we don't talk about as much with Duncan is the fact that he's 6'7". He is a big guard or wing or whatever you want to call him. He is not a physically small player. He could lose the physical battles here and there, but he's not small. So when he's out there with the starting 5, the smallest guy out there essentially is Cade, right? That's tough. If Duncan Robinson is the weak matchup and he still is 6'7", still knows where to be, still can play passing lanes, and he's just had this playoff focus to him as well. I think that's a really noticeable on both ends. Like, that's tough to deal with. It's not Duncan getting played off the floor because he's been able to hold his own, and he's not small. Sometimes you have guys who are 3-point specialists and they're like 6'3", 6'4". You're giving up size. The Pistons don't give up size with Duncan. I think we've noticed that a lot in this series particularly.
Devon asks how tall. I mean, I feel like he's taller than me whenever I've stood around him, and I think I'm like a legit 6'6". So yeah, Chuck, I think I brought this up, Chuck, that I remember Duncan's lack of defense in Miami getting him benched. His effort this year has been impressive. I agree. Like, that was everybody's, Devon, I missed it. My bad. Devon is not asking us how tall he is. I don't think. I think he's, yeah. Okay. It was the 6'7" joke. Got it. Okay. Well played. Sorry. Yeah. My bad. Missed that one way over my head. Where do you want to go to next? We talked about Tobias. Here is a question about Cade Cunningham. I think let's go back to this and then we can get to some of the other players. Chuck says, from a two-way perspective, are we about at Wemby and Cade and then everybody else? Like, just quickly going through the NBA, if you're truly talking two-way players, who are the other guys in this conversation for that level of impact on both ends of the court?
You could put Giannis in there.
Yeah, that's a good call.
I think you could put Giannis in there. There's a handful of guys. I would really have to go down the list. I don't know if you want to put LeBron in there at this stage of his career.
I don't think I don't think the defensive impact from LeBron is good enough anymore. I saw somebody say like Scotty Barnes, and like what Scotty did in the first round, I would agree. That wasn't the offense that we saw from Scotty all regular season, but if Scotty Barnes is going to be what we saw in the first round on offense, that would actually be a good name. I think it just speaks to how good Cade is on both ends of the court, though. I mean, I literally just pulled up Twitter and somebody I really respect was throwing out the idea of like him being one of the better heliocentric offensive players on the defensive end that we've seen recently in the NBA. Like, this is a real conversation we've been talking about for 6 months now that the wider NBA fan base is starting to see play out in real time.
Yeah, and I think it's working for 2 reasons. One, the defensive impact, as we've talked about. But 2, as heliocentric as Cade typically is, I feel like they've done a good job in the playoffs of taking the load off his plate where they can, too. He only got 6 points in the first half, and, they built an 11-point lead at halftime really off of their defense. And then I think Dane is coming out. He had 11 points in the first half. He's really become that second ball handler that they really, really needed. And that's made it a bit easier for Cade as well. Danis has been in closing lineups. He's been coming in to finish the first quarter with Cade. So it's been heliocentric, but I think Danis has freed up just enough for Cade on offense, for Cade to continue to give that effort defensively. So you're never getting a break from Cade, essentially. As long as he's on the floor, he's going to be impacting both ends.
Wes brings up a healthy Jason Tatum. I think I'd agree with that. Hate to even bring up this name right now because of the discourse that's going on, but SGA, I think SGA's defensive role is much different than Cade's, but SGA is very, very good in the
Is
role.
Kawhi sit on that level?
Who?
Kawhi.
Yeah, I mean, when he's healthy, listen, Kawhi probably had a stretch of the season where he was a top 3 player, playing as a top 3 player in the NBA. Kawhi is going to be all NBA this year. So yeah, I think he ended up making enough games. I'm pretty sure that's not incorrect. I did the awards. I should know. Yeah, he played 65. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good call as well. Okay, let's go ahead and go to break, because I think this will be a good one to then actually the one you just starred, Wes, will be good. We can talk Danis Jenkins, Ausar Thompson, Karis LeVert got some minutes last night, Ron Holland, like all of these different guys. And then I do want to talk the center position as well, because I think that will be fun to talk about here going into games 3 and 4 in Cleveland. We'll get into Danis Jenkins and his play right after this.
All right, we're back for segment 2, and we're going to continue talking about Jenkins as we finish that segment with. And I wrote about this today, but, Danis did not play well at the beginning of the playoffs. He was shooting like 26% through the first 5 games. I think physically there was just a difference between him and guys like Bane and Suggs last series. And JB stuck with him, trusting that he would figure it out, and he's figured it out. He's been really good for them for the last 4 games or so, because he did close out that game 6 win, comeback win as well. What's impressed you most just about how he's got to solve this on the fly and become one of their core players?
I guess if I can be blunt, I will say, I don't think JB had a whole lot of other options with what happened at the deadline and the decisions that were made with the roster, which again, I was fine with. I think it was you almost had to go with Danis Jenkins. You were putting your stock into Danis Jenkins. And again, I was cool with it. The only thing I brought up was Danis was essentially a rookie this year, and there was a possibility that those minutes could not be great in the playoffs. And we saw that play out for a little while. And now we see him playing much, much better. Very impactful minutes. We see him not only playing in the non-Cade minutes, we see him, as you mentioned, playing with Cade. We see him closing games. Listen, the box score numbers still aren't going to wow you, right? The shooting percentages still aren't great right now. 3 rebounds, 3 assists. He doesn't turn the ball over. I think that's one sneaky aspect of the Pistons. And somebody brought this up with Tobias Harris. While Cade averages still 5.5 turnovers right now, and Jalen Duren is averaging 2.5, a lot of the other guys aren't turning the ball over. And that's very important, including, your backup point guard, essentially, in Danis Jenkins. So it's really good to see him figuring this out. I will say this, Chuck brings up a great one. My biggest question for game 3, does Jenkins play well on the road as he has the last 3 home games? If so, this series will be short. And so I do think that will be really interesting. I think where this ends up being a quality matchup for the Pistons, O2, is Cleveland doesn't seem to be able to really speed up and disrupt the Pistons offense. You know what I mean? My worry, I think I said this before already, but my worry with Toronto, if they would have won game 7, was that Toronto defense could have really disrupted the Pistons offense with turnovers and deflections and full court pressing and all of those different type of things. Cleveland tried to extend their defense yesterday, but eventually it went away. And even when they were doing it, Cade was able to break it down. And then that's when you saw Ausar Thompson just feasting out of the dunker spot. So I do wonder if we continue to see a more comfortable Danis Jenkins, even on the road, because I'm not sure Cleveland has the defenders to really make him uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, just the difference in physicality from that series to this series is staggering, right? Cleveland does not play with the level of force that Orlando plays with, especially when they had Franz, who has probably defended Cade better than anybody else, in the postseason so far. And I think the Pistons could feel that difference, and that's why they've been so effective on offense. They've shot the 3 really, really well through 2 games. They're not turning the ball over. They're taking care of it. Duran has had more space. It's just, you could just see that this is a team that just clawed its way to the second round, and now they're not like relaxing, but they are adjusting to a team that's just not playing them the same way. If it's going to be more of a finesse game, then anything that comes down to like a pure strength or size advantage, the Pistons are winning those battles.
Can I make a comparison that nobody's going to like? Last year, I think even Knicks fans would tell you that their run to the Eastern Conference semifinals was boosted by the series they had to play against the Detroit Pistons. That how Detroit played them and how they had to win and fight and claw for that series helped them be better in the next round and beyond. And I see a little bit of that in what Detroit has had to do thus far. Now, I'm not saying that, listen, I picked Pistons in 7 going into this series, so I guess I do think that Detroit will end up winning this series and go to the Eastern Conference Eastern Conference Finals and most likely meet the Knicks again. But I do wonder if there's a little bit of what they had to go through in round 1. You have no choice but to grow from that, Omari. Like when you're down 3-1, backs against the wall in the way that they were, let alone the 20-point deficit in game 6. Do you know the amount of confidence you take from that as a player, especially in the immediate, right? Like eventually that may wear off. Next year, they may not look back to, hey, we can't, we were down 20 in game 6 against the Magic in 2026. They may not be able to do that in 2028. But in that very same playoff run, like I do think that series probably was the best thing that happened to them since they won it, right? Now, if they would have lost, I wouldn't be saying this, but there is something to be said for the confidence. And again, it's hard to find the right word because I agree with you. I don't think that they relaxed because you can see a team that's very motivated and intense and all of that, but it does seem like there's some sort of weight that's not there anymore. And they are playing just a little bit more free than what we saw a lot of round 1.
Yeah. I mean, game 6 was essentially the sports equivalent of a near-death experience. You were down 24 points with 11 minutes left on the road in the third quarter, and the series are down 3-1. I don't think it gets more backs against the wall than that. And then you won that game by forcing 23 straight missed shots. You held them to 8 points in the fourth quarter.
Say it the exact same way you said it. Not the
23 straight missed shots. No, the first part.
Before that, they forced 23 straight. Not Orlando missed. They forced 23. I think that's an important context.
Yeah, and I just always replay that possession in my head. Cade gets a bucket, and then Ausar just completely shuts down a Wendell Carter Jr. dunk on the other end. That would have broke that streak, and it's just like absolutely not. But when you have to rise to the moment like that, I do think everything else feels a little bit easier. Like you said, it feels a little bit lighter. It was not going to get more difficult than that for them in this series. It just wasn't. They backed themselves into the corner to the furthest extent that they reasonably could, and then clawed their way back from that. So, yeah, that builds confidence, that builds know-how. And like the Knicks last year, I think that's absolutely made them a better team in the second round.
I want to read off some stats for you, O2, and then you just pick out the one that maybe surprises you, that you think is the most impactful, that you would watch for moving forward. So this is just through 2 games. The Pistons are 44% from 3. They're making 21 free throws a game, 14 offensive rebounds, only 12.5 turnovers, 10.5 steals. The Cavaliers are shooting 30% from 3, only 10 offensive rebounds, 15.5 turnovers. Any of those numbers, as I read them to you from these first 2 games, stand out to you or immediately jump to you in any sort of way?
The extent that they've won the offensive glass does surprise me a little bit because Cleveland was a better offensive rebounding team than the Pistons during the regular season. And they've got Allen and Mobley, 2 strong rebounds. But again, like that physicality difference has just manifested itself differently in the playoffs compared to the regular season. The Pistons have not just been more aggressive on the boards, they've been stronger on them. Like when Duran's out there, the possession game clearly is in the Pistons' favor because he's owning Cleveland on both ends. So I thought it would be a more competitive battle as far as, the Pistons trying to claw possessions back from them. But that hasn't been the case at all. They've just straight up been better on the glass.
All right, let's talk about, you want to go Ausar Thompson, Karis LeVert, or this?
Let's talk Ausar.
Okay,
Let's talk Ausar.
All right, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, because he is having a breakout party. It feels like we've always known what he could do defensively, but now he's doing it on the biggest stage. And it just feels like everybody's kind of collectively realizing, oh, wow, he is a one-man defense onto himself. He casually does things several times a night that most players don't do in several weeks. And his impact has been felt every single game. He picked up his 4th foul a minute into the 3rd quarter. And that's when Cleveland started their comeback. That's not a coincidence. Ausar just meant a much different battle for Cleveland.
Omari, he's averaging 9 points, 8.5 rebounds, over 3 assists, 2 steals, and just under 2 blocks. He's averaging 4 stocks per game. It's truly unreal. And I'm very happy for Ausar because I don't know that people understood how good he was defensively coming into the playoffs. It actually was... I usually don't get frustrated about these things. And this year I found myself getting frustrated about 2 different awards. One was JB in terms of coach of the year and just feeling like JB absolutely deserved it. And I know we don't know yet. And then Ausar. And when I would see ballots come out and people talk about him maybe not being first team all defense. And listen, like I top 3, whatever. Like, I think that's a real debate. Rudy is awesome defensively. Obviously, Wembanyama is incredible. Chet, whatever. But to not have him first team all defense after the season he had put together, and quite frankly, the defense that Detroit had all year that was pretty... I'm trying not to use words I don't like to use, that I felt like was somewhat obvious was led by Ausar Thompson, was just very frustrating to me a lot of the time. And now people are starting to see it. And you see the people talking about it's not just the defensive disruption, it's also how solid he can be at the point of attack. And the ability to do both is so special.
Yeah, it really is special. And he's also been finding himself offensively more and more this season. Like the baseline cutting, operating out of the dunker spot, attacking in transition. It feels like he understands how defenses are going to play him. So he's just got to stay moving. We're not seeing him just standing in the corner like we did in seasons past, right? He has just been nearly as involved, it feels like, as getting their offense moving as guys like Danis and Cade. Just because of everything he's doing, his screening, his play finishing, his ability to push the ball, like all that's come through. And he's had a phenomenal two-way series. So absolutely feels like a breakout series for Ausar. And I want to talk about Ron too, because Ron picked up where Ausar left off, I thought, in a lot of ways as well.
Give me one second. Michael, I think, brings up a fair point. Not trying to be critical, but did a couple of the Ausar fouls look like poor choices that took him out of the game? I thought the third one was, right? Is that the one where he pushed Harden?
I felt like that was a flop. I didn't. Okay. I get it, but when I saw it, it didn't look like he pushed hard enough to initiate that type of thing. It was a smart play by Harden. He sold it well enough. I feel like that was more flop than a Ausar push, but I know some people disagree with that.
I don't always rewind those things, so I'll be like completely transparent. Like sometimes I miss the nuances and the minutia of some of that because of how I watch and I'm taking notes and I'm trying to tweet and blue sky and all of that. And it's like, okay, well, I don't have time to like rewatch this multiple times. Just on like first watch is like, oh no, like no, Ausar, like you can't do that in that moment. You know what I mean? So, and then I think his fourth one, if I remember correctly, it seemed like you just like, yeah, don't reach. Richard says it. Just don't reach. You got to know how important you are to be on the court, and you just can't reach in that situation. T-Bon says, easily best Pistons pod out there. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Our guy, YouTube user, I'm just get caught up to live. I'm watching at work and don't care if my boss catches me. We appreciate it. I've just realized we went toe-to-toe with the front office show right now. So I'm sure there's some Pistons fans over there watching Keith and Trevor do an amazing job as they always do over on that one. Also, if you guys, I'll be on Slam and Jam tomorrow with Andrew and Alex, and we'll be talking all of the series, but obviously be talking Pistons. So make sure you guys check that out as well. But you wanted to talk about Ron Holland too. As we said, we don't get much right, O2, but we both thought this could be a Ron Holland series where he got utilized a little bit, and we've seen him in both games 1 and 2.
Yeah, he checked in immediately after Ausar picked up his second foul. And I think his first possession on James Harden was a block. I don't know if they credited it as a block or a steal, but Harden drove, Holland eliminated the shot. Ball went out of bounds. Pistons get the ball. And then Harden had an opportunity to attack Cade in transition one-on-one. He took the ball back to the wing. Holland picked him up and then poked it away and, came up with the steal. And those are just like two examples. But Holland, this is a series for him. Just like he matches up better. Like Harden, being a lead ball handler, D. Mitch being a lead ball handler, those are the guys that I think Holland can really be a pest with. And, I think he's grown a lot as a defender this past year. We talked about it a bit, not as much, but that's carried over into the playoffs. And this series, I think, plays to his strengths as far as being able to initiate transition and then obviously the disruption on the defensive end as well.
I also just want to quickly mention Karis LeVert, who I think has given them some quality minutes. And listen, guys, I'm not the subscriber to on-off numbers. Like, I want to be very, very clear. But I do just want to mention that Karis LeVert has been a positive on-off in the playoffs in totality. Obviously, Ausar has as well. Here's the funniest stat, though. This does kind of track. Cade has a plus 24.1 on-off in the playoffs. Like, just ridiculous for Cade Cunningham. I think it speaks to how good he is and maybe the possibility that this team could at some point maybe continue to add or let Danish continue to grow, right? Danish, a young player. But I thought Karis gave them good minutes and another guy that matches up well in terms of the defense. Okay, before we get to some of the comments, and I know we got to let you get back to work and then you got to travel and get to the games and all of that. Interesting Jalen Duren game. I feel like he continues to struggle to score the basketball. Non-impactful Isaiah Stewart game and a really good Jarrett Allen game. I don't know what to think of all of it. O2. Like the Duren isolation stuff just doesn't look like it's going to be able to be there in the playoffs. I don't know. I don't know what to think about this right now.
It's weird because he had such a fluid move. I think it was last night. It might have been in game one. Like he caught the ball at the top of the key and then he just spun right through Mobley and, finished right through traffic. And it looked as fluid and as confident as he looked during the regular season. And we just haven't really seen that with that consistency. He's still, fumbling, some balls he usually gets his hands on.
Two of them last night, Omari. He fumbled a Cade pass and then I think it was a rebound or something or a handoff or something.
And I mean, his hands were automatic all season. Yes. I mean, if JD's got some of the best hands in the league, honestly. So it's been surprising to see that. And, I thought he was still pretty good defensively last night.
Sure. Yeah.
But we're just not seeing like that consistent two-way impact as much as we did during the regular season. And, and I'd be curious just to see how he continues to attack this matchup with Mobley and Allen, because I think he's stronger than both of them. We saw him have some big games against them in the regular season, but those were also, I think, helped by him getting to the line. And, those calls haven't been the same in the playoffs either. I think teams have been able to play him more physically.
Yeah, it's a great call out from everybody about the defense and the rebounding. I've been bringing up the defense back to whenever they were down, and some people kind of yelled at me for being too positive with him. To the rebounding point, though, he actually leads the playoffs in offensive rebounds per game. He is averaging 10 and 10, like to be fair to Jalen Duren. I think the big thing is he's 48% from the field. He was 65% from the field in the regular season. So it's a little bit of a struggle. Any thoughts on Stu? Listen, my guy Steven's here. I always appreciate Steven so much. Like, Stu might be the one I end up having to eat the most crow on. I always said Stu was going to be such a playoff player, and we just haven't seen it, at least in this series. And I don't know what's going on there. I know, again, we've brought this up. The Bishop says, Kuz says he's hurt. I know that this has been something there. Like, I kind of hope that's true in the sense that I just think Isaiah Stewart's a better player than what we've seen and a more impactful player than what we've seen. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I don't think he's looked the same physically outside of that performance where he had 8 blocks. Yeah, it just hasn't been quite the same for him. I never want to speculate. And, whenever I talk about something, I want to say 100%, like this is what their case is. But just watching them, it does feel like he hasn't had his usual energy and his usual mobility on defense.
Yeah, even the energy a little bit. So hoping for that energy on the road in Cleveland would be massive. Okay, we got to get through these and get you out of here, O2. Chuck says the Cavs would have been harder out if they hadn't traded for Harden. So just a quick, what do you think there? I think, so here's my thoughts and I'll let you go. I think it would be harder for the Pistons defensively because I don't think they would have the guy left to defend a healthy Darius Garland, assuming a healthy Darius Garland. But I do think it would give them, well, that might not be true because Harden's kind of getting attacked defensively also. Yeah, maybe so, based on the way Harden's playing right now.
It's tough to say, because Garland's always had injury issues, but he did finish the season strong. So, I think we could assume what he did in the Clippers, he would have done in this series as well. That's tough for me to say because that's such a small backcourt that even though like both of those guys could really score the ball, like at some point you're just giving up too much defensively for it to really matter, I think. And Harden hasn't played well defensively either, so I don't know if there's much of a difference there, but I don't know if it'll make that much of a difference. I think Garland helps in some ways, but I don't know if he fixes some of the broader issues that Cleveland's had in this series.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is defensively, either are going to get attacked in some way, right? Like the stats out that on drives against James Harden, the Pistons were 7 of 7 or something. I think that was over on the Hoop Collective. I think if Garland was, then they would just find ways to get him switched onto Cade or Tobias or whatever, and then those guys would take him to the post. I think the argument would come offensively. Like, do you think Darius, because of the type of player he is, may give Detroit more trouble? I think my counter there would be, like, that's a great matchup for Danis Jenkins, right? Like, that is a really good matchup for Danis on the defensive end. So, I don't know, maybe something we can explore more when the series is over or something like that. Wes brings up a fair point. Better off-ball player than Harden. That's fair. Last one here. Devon says, before I get to driving, do you guys think the whole Cade needs to be for Cade to be great, he needs a second guy and score shooters being overblown by the media? We know it's truth, but 2-0. Here would be my quick, just like explanation. Tobias Harris is playing like a number 2 right now. Like that. My argument would be that even though most of us would agree that Tobias isn't your number 2 long-term for this team, that maybe not fully what I would envision, but Tobias is essentially given them through 9 games offensively what I think that they need moving forward, which is a consistent 20-point per game guy that's getting clutch buckets that can attack certain matchups. And along with that, they're also getting a 40+% volume shooter in Duncan Robinson. And they're doing that without giving much up on the defensive end. So I do kind of think we're seeing the vision, O2, just not necessarily with the long-term options.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as a whole. Can you pull the question back up? I had a specific response that I was going to say, and then the question disappeared, and it threw me off.
Wes is going to have to go find it, but essentially it was the national media is saying that Cade needs a number 2 option. Do we
right.
There it is. Do we still think that that's true considering they're in the second round and up 2-0 right now?
Yeah, I think that the concerns about the number 2 guy were valid just based on what we've seen from teams that have won championships in recent history. But I think Tobias stepping into that role maybe somewhat unexpectedly has solved that for the Pistons. And I say both of those things while also saying that I do think it was a little bit overblown, only because I don't think the Pistons ever fully got the credit for just how great of a defensive team they were last season and how their defense made up for so much of that, which we're also seeing in the playoffs. Just being on a different tier defensively wins you games as long as you can get those half-court buckets when you need them. And like Tobias and Cade have been go-to guys in the half-court, so that's fixed that issue for them. I don't think you need a superstar scorer next to Cade to be a perennial 60-win team. I think a good 20 points per game score that's not giving up anything defensively is good enough. As long as you have Ausar, as long as you're, sustaining that defensive impact, forcing turnovers, offensive glass, all that, like you're going to be fine in a playoff setting. And, they've won 5 straight playoff games now with Tobias Harris as that number 2. I think that just shows that the roster that they have already was good enough to win. And we have to see how far they get, but you're not in the second round and up 2-0 if the roster you had already wasn't ready to win, which is to say the team they were in the regular season, the defense they were in the regular season, I don't think they just got quite enough credit for actually how good they were and how much better they were than the rest of the East.
Okay, I actually did this research a couple years ago, and I didn't label it well enough to know exactly what different things were. B1 through B. Okay, so I went through 10 years, and this was in 2024. The average second score in the regular season for teams that made the conference finals, East and West, so this was 4 teams in each of those years, was 20.8. That was the average regular season points per game for the second leading scorer. If you only did the last 5 years, again, I did this in 2024, it actually had gone up to 21.3. Essentially, the 20 point per game was kind of the threshold it looked like for a second score in the regular season for teams that eventually went on to the conference finals in either series or either conference. There are some outliers in terms of max and mins across there, but I actually did do that data. I actually even have a graph. I bet Wes helped me out with that. Okay, final two questions here real quick. Pistons talk. Make sure you're listening to everything they do as well. Just wanted to show love. Appreciate you. Also had a question for Omari. How was the crowd over games 1 and 2?
Extremely loud. They mute the mics on TV because the broadcast is sitting on the court, they're courtside. So they have to mute the mics in order for the broadcasters to be heard on the broadcast. So, I've seen that a lot on social media, people saying the crowd seem like they suck because it's so quiet. But that's because the broadcast mutes the mics. Anybody who was at the game would tell you it's like deafeningly loud in there. And absolutely at the ends of both of those games, closing out the wins. I mean, that Detroit basketball at the end of last night's game was just the type that gives you chills, So yeah, don't pay attention to the crowd on TV because they are intentionally deadening the sound for the broadcasters. And
then final thing, the audience wants to know if you have to drive or if you get to fly to Cleveland.
Yeah. So I am flying. I mentioned I was flying in the press room yesterday and everybody was like, oh, you're flying to Cleveland. Look at you. And I was just saying, when you look at the price of the rental car, the price to park at the hotel, and also consider that gas is $5, flying even with the rising fuel costs is still pretty economical. So I'm flying to Cleveland.
As the best writer on the beat, and that's with all due respect to the other beat writers who I've got a chance to know and meet a little bit and are awesome as well, I think you deserve it. So 15-minute flight. I will tell you recently, I made a fool of myself talking to somebody about like how close different places were and thinking that you would need to fly as opposed to driving. And I showed that I've not been out of Kansas a whole lot whenever talking to somebody about something on the East Coast. I don't always understand these things very well. Me, who has to drive 4 hours just to get to the airport to then fly to Detroit. But all right, I will guess that we'll be back on Tuesday, guys. We'll let you know, hit the bell or whatever you have to hit so you make sure you get the notifications. But that would be my guess, is we'll go ahead and let 2 games play out. Financial efficiency O. Yes, we were this close to offseason O, and instead we have financial efficient O2. I love it. So yeah, I would guess Tuesday. Something crazy happens on Saturday, but like I said, I have graduation. I'm not even going to be able to watch the game live. I don't know about Sunday, so we'll see. But definitely Tuesday, I would say. Other than that, thank you, guys. Incredible turnout for 1-2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. Insane stuff. We appreciate you. Make sure you're supporting all of the other Pistons podcasts. Pistons Talk, Order the Blazing Horse, Locked On Pistons, the ones that I'm forgetting that I'm very sorry about. The Pin Down. That's the biggest one I should be sorry about right now. And then, of course, the Detroit Free Press and Motor City Hoops Substack. O2, you got work to do. Take it away, my guy.
Yes, as always, big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and big shout out to Wes Davenport, as always. And we'll talk to you all next week.